Most people buying chocolate have no idea that the bar they chose for their health may be the worst one on the shelf. We went to 6 stores, pulled bars off the racks, and checked every one of them against published laboratory testing and federal labeling law. Here is the finding that stops people cold. When Consumer Reports tested 28 dark chocolate bars from 21 brands, its scientists detected lead and cadmium in every single one. In 23 of those 28 bars, eating just 1 ounce a day would put an adult over California's threshold for at least one of those metals. And the bars that performed worst were not the cheap ones. They were the dark, high cocoa premium bars that people switched to on purpose, many of them on a doctor's advice. Meanwhile, at the cheap end of the aisle, several products failed for a completely different reason, which is that they are not legally chocolate at all. We are counting down 4 stores that failed, then 2 that held up, and finishing with the one rule that fixes this. Let us get into it. Before we start, one promise, because this topic gets handled badly, and I am not going to do that to you. Nobody is being poisoned. If you eat a square of dark chocolate most nights, you are not in danger, and the ending of this video is not going to be stop eating chocolate. The threshold everyone quotes is California's Proposition 65 maximum allowable dose level, and you need to understand exactly what that is. It is a labeling trigger. It is the point at which a company has to put a warning on the package in California. It is set very conservatively. It is a state rule and not a federal food safety standard. And the Confectioners Trade Association is correct when it points out that these are not food safety limits. There is no binding federal limit for lead or cadmium in chocolate for adults, which is precisely why testers use California's number, because it is the only clear benchmark there is. So when we say a bar exceeded the threshold, we mean it crossed a conservative labeling line, not that it is dangerous. Everything here is about knowing what you are buying. And the rule this whole video runs on is this. The percentage on the front tells you how much cocoa. It does not tell you what came with it. Number 4, Walmart. This is where the highest volume of chocolate in America moves, and it is where the cheap end of the aisle fails a test most people do not know exists. Federal law defines what chocolate is. Under the standards of identity, a product called chocolate has to contain chocolate liquor, which is ground cocoa bean, and the fat in it has to be cocoa butter. That is the legal definition. Cocoa butter is also, by a wide margin, the most expensive ingredient in a bar. So here's what happens when a manufacturer wants the taste without the cost. They swap the cocoa butter for a cheaper vegetable fat, usually palm oil, palm kernel oil, or coconut oil. And the moment they do that, federal rules say they can no longer call it chocolate. Those fats are chemically incompatible with cocoa butter, and they are never permitted in a product labeled chocolate. So the product needs a new name. Watch for these words, because they are not marketing fluff, they are legal signals. Chocolatey, chocolate flavored, compound coating, made with chocolate. Every one of those phrases is a company telling you in language a regulator approved that what you are holding did not meet the standard. Number 3, the drugstore aisle, Walgreens and CVS, and the gift box tier that lives there. Russell Stover, Whitman's, Brach's. The heart-shaped box, the holiday assortment, the sampler that has been on your family's table for 50 years. These are emotional objects, not just products, and that is exactly why the formulation matters. Turn the box over and read the ingredient order, because ingredients are listed by weight, most first. On a great many of these products, the first ingredient is sugar, not cocoa. Sugar before chocolate means you are holding a candy that is mostly sweetener, with chocolate as a flavoring. Then look for those 4 initials that show up on the back of an enormous number of mass-market bars: polyglycerol, polyricinolate. It is an emulsifier, usually made from castor beans, and both American and European regulators consider it safe, so this is not a safety complaint. It is a cost story. What it does is reduce the thickness of liquid chocolate so it flows through machinery more easily, and the industry is completely open about why that matters. One major manufacturer of the additive markets it to chocolate companies in plain language, saying cocoa butter is an expensive raw material and that using their product means lower recipe costs through less cocoa butter. Industry figures put the possible cocoa butter reduction somewhere in the range of 10 to 30%. So the additive exists in large part to let a company use less of the ingredient you are actually paying for. Now do the melt test, which is the most convincing thing in this entire video and takes 10 seconds. Put a small piece on your tongue and do not chew. Cocoa butter melts just below human body temperature. That is its defining physical property. And it is why real chocolate seems to disappear into a smooth, clean finish. A palm or coconut fat substitute melts at a higher temperature than your mouth, so it does not fully melt. It leaves a waxy film coating the roof of your mouth that lingers. Once you have felt that difference, you cannot unfeel it, and you will never need a laboratory again. There is a third device worth knowing, and it is the one your car has been running on you all summer. Call it the bloom test. Leave a bar somewhere warm and then let it cool. Real chocolate develops fat bloom, a pale gray or white filming as the cocoa butter separates and recrystallizes on the surface. It looks alarming, and it is completely harmless, and the bar is still perfectly good to eat. A compound coating behaves differently, tending to go dull and greasy rather than developing that fine pale bloom, because the fat in it was chosen specifically to be more stable at higher temperatures. That temperature stability is the entire reason the industry uses those fats. It survives a warm warehouse. It also survives your mouth, which is exactly the problem. If one of these bars is in your pantry right now, you are about halfway through, and you did nothing wrong. The next store is where the number on the front starts misleading people. Number 2, Target, and the entire premium mid-tier, the rest of the industry follows. Lindt, Ghirardelli, Good & Gather, all sitting together, all wearing a percentage on the front of the package. 70%, 85%, 90%. Here is what that number actually means, and it is not what most people think. The percentage tells you the total proportion of the bar that came from the cocoa bean. That is cocoa solids plus cocoa butter combined. It does not tell you the ratio between them. It does not tell you the quality of the bean. It does not tell you where it was grown, and it does not tell you anything at all about what else came along for the ride. 2 bars can both say 72% and be completely different products. And here is the regulatory gap almost nobody knows about, which explains why American chocolate tastes the way it does. For a product to be called milk chocolate in the United States, federal standards require only 10% chocolate liquor. 10. In the European Union, the minimum total cocoa solids for milk chocolate is 25%. So a bar can be legally sold as milk chocolate here at well under half the cocoa content that the same category requires in Europe. And the rest of that bar is sugar and dairy. That is not a scandal, and nobody broke a law. It is simply a different floor, set decades ago, and it is why people who travel come home saying the chocolate tasted different over there. It did. Europe also permits up to 5% of certain vegetable fats in something still called chocolate, but requires the label to state that it contains vegetable fats in addition to cocoa butter. The disclosure is mandatory. Read that again and think about the drugstore aisle we just left. The percentage on the front tells you how much cocoa. It does not tell you what came with it. And now we get to the part where that number turns against the people who trusted it most. Number 1, and this is the worst result in the entire investigation, Whole Foods and Sprouts and the organic, single origin, high percentage premium shelf. This is where the person who did everything right gets caught. Think about who buys an 85% organic dark bar. It is very often someone over 55 who was told by a cardiologist or read in a reputable place that dark chocolate carries flavanols that may support blood pressure and heart health. That is real science, and it is not what we are disputing. So they switched. They gave up the milk chocolate they actually preferred, they paid 2 or 3 times as much, and they chose the darkest bar on the shelf because darker meant more cocoa, and more cocoa meant more of the good compound. Here is what the testing found. In the December 2022 Consumer Reports investigation, lead and cadmium were detected in all 28 bars. 23 of the 28 exceeded California's threshold for at least one metal at 1 ounce per day. 5 exceeded it for both at once. And look at which ones. An organic 70% bar from Theo came in at 120% of the lead threshold and 142% for cadmium. That same brand's organic 85% bar came in higher on both, at 140% and 189%. The Trader Joe's 85% dark bar registered 127% of the lead threshold and 229% of the cadmium threshold, the highest cadmium figure in the group. Familiar names appear throughout. A Lindt 70% bar and a Dove 70% bar exceeded on cadmium. A Godiva 72% bar and a Hershey's Special dark exceeded on lead. Now the mechanism, because this is the part that explains everything and it is genuinely fascinating. It comes from a 3-year study by the advocacy group As You Sow and the National Confectioners Association, funded by a 2018 legal settlement. The two metals get in by completely different routes. Cadmium comes up out of the ground, the cacao tree draws it from the soil and moves it into the bean itself, so it is inside the cocoa, and no amount of washing removes it. It depends on where the tree grew. Lead is different. Lead is almost entirely a post-harvest problem. Wet beans are spread outdoors to ferment and dry, and lead-bearing dust and dirt settle onto them during drying, fermentation, and transport. It lands on the outside, which means better cleaning and better handling can genuinely reduce it. And now, the cruel arithmetic. Both metals live in the cocoa, not in the sugar and not in the milk. So the more cocoa in the bar, the more of both you get. The 85% bar contains more cocoa than the 50% bar by definition, which means the health-motivated choice, the one recommended by a doctor, the expensive organic one, is structurally the higher metal choice. Not because anyone cheated, because of what cocoa is. And organic certification cannot help you here, which is the loophole that puts this store at number 1. Organic certification governs farming practice. It governs what was sprayed, how the soil was managed, what inputs were permitted. It does not and cannot certify the naturally occurring cadmium content of the ground that tree grew in. A field can be perfectly organic and sit on cadmium-rich volcanic soil. So the certification you paid the most for at the store, whose entire identity is that somebody already vetted the shelf, addresses a completely different question than the one you needed answered. Follow-up testing in 2023 across 48 cocoa products, including powders, chips, and mixes, found detectable lead and cadmium in every product tested. Now, let us talk about why the whole category changed underneath you. Because there is one more thing driving everything on these shelves, and it is not a conspiracy, it is a commodity chart. For roughly 30 years, the price of cocoa was flat or falling in real terms, then it detonated. Cocoa futures climbed from around $2,500 a metric ton in early 2023 to an all-time record of $12,931 in December of 2024. That is a rise of 177% in a single year, the largest commodity spike of its kind since nickel. Poor harvests in West Africa, disease, aging trees, and climate volatility all hit at once. Prices have come down substantially since, but they remain far above the $2,000 to $3,000 range that held for the previous decade. Now put yourself in a manufacturer's chair, your single most expensive input just multiplied. You have 3 options: raise the price, shrink the bar, or change the recipe. The industry did all 3. The average American chocolate bar went from about $2.43 in July of 2021 to about $3.45 by last year, a rise of roughly 41%. Hershey announced low double-digit price increases and said it might reduce pack sizes. Lindt raised prices by nearly 16% in the first half of 2024. Cadbury's dairy milk shrank from 200 grams to 180. And by industry estimates, around 22% of chocolate manufacturers reformulated at least one product line, with palm and shea oils increasingly stepping in for cocoa components, especially in seasonal products. About 41% of shoppers said they noticed a change in the taste or texture of something they buy regularly. So when you tell me the holiday chocolate does not taste the way it used to, you are not being nostalgic and you are not imagining it. You are tasting a documented reformulation driven by a commodity chart, and nobody printed that on the front of the box. That is the machine underneath all 6 of these stores. Now, here is what actually held up. Best option number 3, Aldi, and specifically the Moser-Roth bars. This is the reversal, and it is the one that surprises people most. The discount store that shoppers sometimes apologize for using sells a German-made dark chocolate in individually wrapped portions at a fraction of the price of the premium shelf. Read the panel, and it is short and it is honest. Cocoa mass, cocoa butter, sugar, and not a great deal else. Cocoa butter is present as the fat, which means it is legally chocolate, and it passes the snap test and the melt test cleanly. Here is my honest caveat, and I am going to give it to you rather than oversell. Moser-Roth was not among the bars in the Consumer Reports testing, so I cannot tell you its metals numbers, and neither can anyone else who has not tested it. What I can tell you is that it is a clean label, cocoa butter, real chocolate product at a price the premium brands cannot approach, and the individually wrapped portioning happens to solve the portion problem we are about to discuss. Cheap and low quality are not the same thing, and this aisle proves it. Best option number 2, and this is the only brand-level recommendation in this video grounded directly in the published testing, Ghirardelli, widely available at Target, Walmart, and in the large tubs at Costco. Of the 28 bars Consumer Reports tested, exactly 5 came in below California's threshold for both lead and cadmium. 2 of those 5 were Ghirardelli, the Intense Dark 86%, and the Intense Dark Twilight Delight 72%. The other 3 were Masked Organic Dark 80%, Taza Organic Deliciously Dark 70%, and Valrhona Abinau 85%. Notice something important about that 86% Ghirardelli result. It is one of the darkest bars in the entire test, and it still came in under the line on both metals, which proves the point that matters most here. High cocoa content does not doom a bar. Sourcing does. A company that knows which soils its beans come from and controls its drying and cleaning can make a very dark bar that tests low. That is a supply chain decision, not a law of nature. And the real criterion, more useful than any brand name, is this. Buy from companies that publish their heavy metals testing and will send you a certificate of analysis if you ask. Transparency is a better standard than reputation, because reputation is marketing and a test result is a number. Best option number 1, and it is not a brand at all, it is the rule, and it is the reason this video ends where it does. If you eat dark chocolate for your health, do not stop. Do this instead, and it is 3 moves. First, come down on percentage. Both metals ride in the cocoa, so a lower cocoa bar carries less of both. Consumer Reports' own guidance is exactly this. If you are looking at a bar nobody has tested, choose the 70% over the 80, or the 65 over the 70. Milk chocolate carries meaningfully less of both metals than dark. You do not have to buy the darkest bar on the shelf to get the benefit, and the flavanol advantage of moving from 70 to 85% is far smaller than most people assume. Second, mind the portion, because every threshold in this video was calculated on 1 ounce per day, every day. 1 ounce is a substantial amount of chocolate. A square or 2 most evenings sits well under the number that produced all these headlines. Third, rotate your origins. Because cadmium comes from specific soils, buying the same single origin bar from the same region every single week concentrates whatever that particular ground contains. Varying brands and origins averages it out. And one more thing that matters more than everything else combined. These thresholds were built around reproductive and developmental risk, which means the group to be genuinely careful with is young children and pregnant women, not a healthy adult having a square after dinner. If you are handing out chocolate to grandchildren, milk chocolate is the lower metal choice, which is a rare case of the thing kids actually want being the better answer. Before you close this, let us clear up 4 things people get wrong. First, cocoa butter is not the enemy. It is the good fat, it is the expensive one, and it is the thing being taken out, not put in. When you see palm oil where cocoa butter should be, that is the downgrade. Second, more cocoa is not automatically better. It is more of everything in the bean, including the 2 metals, which is the whole inversion at the center of this video. Third, organic does not mean low metal. It certifies the farming, not the soil chemistry, and the testing showed organic bars among the highest results. Fourth, exceeding California's threshold does not mean a bar is unsafe. It means it crossed a conservative labeling line built for daily lifetime exposure. And treating that as poison is the single most common error in coverage of this subject. And here is your 5-second aisle check. Turn the bar over and look at the fat. If the first fat is cocoa butter, it is real chocolate. If it is palm kernel, or coconut oil, or if the front says chocolatey or chocolate flavored, put it back. Then look at the first ingredient. If sugar comes before cocoa, you are buying candy, which is fine as long as you know that is what you are buying. That is the whole test, and you can run it in any store in the country in about 5 seconds without remembering a single number from this video. This was never about scaring you away from chocolate. The metals are real, they are documented, and they are also present in trace amounts across a great deal of the food supply, and no reasonable reading of this evidence says a square of dark chocolate after dinner is harming you. What it says is that the industry has known about this since at least that 2018 settlement, that the mechanism is understood, that some companies have solved it well enough to test under the line at 86% cocoa, and that the rest have simply not been required to tell you. You did not do anything wrong. You bought the bar that the label, and often your own doctor, pointed you toward. It is just that the number on the front was answering a different question than the one you were asking. The percentage tells you how much cocoa. It does not tell you what came with it. Now you know how to find out. If this changed how you look at that shelf, pass it to somebody who has a bar of dark chocolate in the cupboard right now for their heart.